You're back on the Zero Hour. I, as always, am your host, Richard RJ Eskow. It comes as no surprise to anyone who listens to this program that the candidacies of Bernie Sanders for president have left a lasting impact on our politics, a lasting resonance in our culture and our society. And my next guest has written a book about exactly that. RJ Rabin-Havt is the former deputy campaign manager for Bernie Sanders in 2020. I worked for Bernie in 2016 in that campaign. And Ari is also the author of the new, highly readable book entitled The Fighting Soul on the Road with Bernie Sanders. So RJ Rabin-Havt, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be back here.
Yeah, always great to talk with you. So I mentioned my own history with Bernie for one reason, basically only, which is I have a book in front of me now in digital form. And here was the sentence that when I went looking through it at random for a starting point for our conversation, Ari, this is the sentence that I highlighted. The biggest problem for us, this isn't talking about the debate, prepping Bernie for the debates. Yep. The biggest problem for us was that due to the overstuffed format, the perception of the debate would come down even more than usual to its big moments. But Bernie would not allow himself to be scripted. It always made him deeply uncomfortable. I got to tell you, that brought back memories. And that, in a nutshell, was to be part of the Bernie campaign team. I would imagine for you was, as it was for others, the sort of special artistry that requires to work with a candidate like that, who doesn't want to be scripted, who knows what he wants to say, but, needs some input and prep and all that. And it always struck me like a kind of interesting tightrope. And you walked it every day because you traveled with Bernie.
Yeah, the true artist in walking that tightrope is, of course, Warren Gunnels, who has been walking that tightrope longer than anybody. Yeah, Bernie is a guy, look, the words that come out of his mouth are precious to him. He holds them tighter than anything else. And almost as a reflex, rejects any attempts to script him.
Right.
And I think that is hard for any staff. I have a few moments in the book where, the feeling is, and Richard, I'm sure you can identify with this, where you're like, oh my God, why can't I work for a normal candidate? Who just when you tell him to walk left, doesn't go, I'm going to go to center because I just think that's better. No, you have to go, no, I'm going to go center. But at the same time, that's what makes him Bernie, that if he had done the things that political advisors had told him for 30 years, if he had become a Democrat, if he hadn't taken his path, let's be frank, he'd be a generic senator from New England at best.
Right.
And probably not even that.
Right. In thinking about Bernie, I always think about this, and your book captures this really well. I always think of it as his meta campaign, right? The meta prefix gets overused, but the very fact that he didn't follow the rules, that he would chastise reporters for not asking better questions, that he would step outside break the third, whatever that theater, break the fourth wall or whatever, time and time again, kind of wound up signaling, I think, to voters that this was a real human being, and made him compelling by his refusal to try to be charismatic or anything. You get what I'm driving at, right?
Well, his charisma is the anti-charisma.
Right.
He is charismatic, and it's not like he's not trying for it. Those people who try to make their hair look messy and they end up looking like idiots because they're trying to no, Bernie is Bernie. It creates its own charisma because people are so used to politicians being so scripted. People are so used to politicians, you see I'm not trying to insult the guy because I actually don't, I don't hate him. Gavin Newsom, just you meet him and every hair is perfect. Once, this story's not in the book. Gavin came into the Senate office to meet Bernie, came in alone. Bernie and I sat with him for about 30 minutes, talked to him. He leaves. Bernie's like, so, well, what did you think of him? And I was like, he's just too damn good looking. And Bernie was like, yeah, everything's perfect. And it's true.
Right.
Every single thing on Gavin Newsom. And Bernie was almost saying that, like, admiringly, like, oh my God, how does he, like, Bernie couldn't do that if he tried, but on Gavin Newsom, every button is perfect. Every hair is in the perfect position. Every follicle is perfectly clean.
When Newsom was running for governor, I had the chance to offer a little advice indirectly to him, but the intermediaries didn't like the advice, which is basically get beat up by Mike Tyson before you announce, that you're too perfect. But he won, so, and then they beat a recall. But yeah, that is definitely not Bernie's style. So tell us, how did you come to originally work for Bernie?
I mean, you knew I was a huge fan before of Bernie. And at the end of the 2016 campaign, the end of like the general election, I think we were all in different places. I was hosting a radio show on Sirius XM. We were all a bit shaken, and I decided I wanted to get back into politics where I'd worked for years. And Harry Reid and basically Faz Shakir both made the suggestion that I work for Bernie. Faz, who eventually became Bernie's campaign manager. Faz ended up introducing me to the office. I met Bernie, and there was kind of just kismet there. And like we had these 2 meetings that went for hours, and we talked about everything. And he ended up hiring me. I left Sirius XM. I came to Bernie's office and worked with him in 2017, 2018, while on a bunch of things where he wasn't really even thinking of running for, he was thinking about running for president, but I should say hadn't decided. And then when he decided to run in 2019, I ended up as deputy campaign manager.
So that's how Bernie works. He's got to get comfortable with you, right? He's got to feel that he knows you, he can relate to you, he can rely on you. And even more than ideology, I think, there's just got to be that.
Ideology really matters. But the thing, Richard, that people kind of miss about Bernie sometimes is he doesn't just believe in an ideology. He believes in a way of doing politics just as firmly. And how you conduct a campaign and how you relate to people. And I think he liked the fact that I liked rallies and I liked and he saw like a talent in producing rallies. I think that was one of the things that actually brought us together was, oh, this is somebody who's not just like, let's buy TV ads. He's like, let's go out to the people.
One of the things that it's right on point, Ari, that you mentioned the way he wants to do politics, because that's so critical to him. And, I think I was hire number 5 or something. And I got off on the wrong foot with him when we went out to dinner the first day because I had some criticisms of the Clinton Foundation. I think I brought up at dinner, and he said, we're not running that kind of campaign. We're going to stay positive. We're going to talk about the issues. And I mean, he really believed it until, I think he got sucker punched a few times and that caught his attention. But
he doesn't really punch, but he does counter punch better than almost anybody else.
Precisely. And this is totally apropos of nothing, but you attribute a quote in this book to Evander Holyfield that I always was told was a Mike Tyson quote.
No, it's Mike Tyson in the book.
Oh, is it?
It was when he was fighting Evander Holyfield.
Oh, when he was fighting. Okay, yeah. Everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. One of the things about Bernie is you're right. He won't throw a punch like that, but he has enormous clarity when somebody does take a punch at him. It seems to somehow, even though he's very idealistic really about how to do politics, I think, but you tell me if you disagree, he has an ability to take a punch and respond lightning fast to, a lower blow or anything, basically than anybody, as good as anybody I've seen in politics.
I mean, he's quick on his feet, almost like a stand-up. I have a few moments in the book where he's just so, like, one of the favorite ones that people like is, which has nothing to do with counterpunching, but just shows like this weird quickness on his feet, was we were in a car, we were driving, somebody called from LA saying, Miley Cyrus is going to endorse Bernie. And I told him this, and he just turns around without a stop and goes, does that mean Hannah Montana will campaign in Montana for us? And it's like, first off, how the hell do you know who Miley Cyrus is?
Right. I was just thinking that.
You didn't understand the reference in the book when he took his stitches out of his head and there was no scar and I called you Wolverine. You didn't understand that reference, which is much more pop culture, like I guess equally pop culturally, but whatever. You didn't understand that, but you understand who Miley Cyrus is. It's like, well,
grandkids.
I have to go shopping for my grandkids.
Exactly. That's the other thing about Bernie. We could go on all day with this part of it, but grandkids are a huge part of his life, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, all right. So the other thing, I guess, if we're talking about, you mentioned there were a couple other moments where he was real fast on his feet. Did you want to cite any of them before we go on?
I mean, just generally, look, I think if you want the prime example, look at like the second debate in Detroit, where first off, before the debate, I've told the story in a few places. He was dancing around the green room to the Charlie Brown song, which is generally not something people see Bernie. But at that debate, you can see every time somebody attacked him, that's where you got, I wrote the damn bill, right? He's just
right.
quick. He'll punch back. He'll fire at you.
Right. He's been in this game a long time. And the other thing that the one line that I think I gave him that he actually used in 2016 and is very pertinent to your book is when people were saying he was too old to run for president, that he should say, if you think I'm too old to run for president, come out with me for a day on the campaign trail, spend a day with me. And then at the end of it, you tell me if I'm too old to run for president, something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But he used it. And that to me comes through in your book. This almost like I'm impressed with you, Ari, that you kept up with him day after day.
I couldn't. I mean, part of the reason I decided to leave the office last July was, frankly, I'm 43 and I can't keep up with him anymore.
Right.
It's just too tiring. Just think about this. He has he can sit in Vermont, go to the Senate, which is the easiest job in the world, right? Take some votes on the floor, give a few speeches, stream. But instead, last week, he's out in New York City and Staten Island protesting with Amazon workers. And the same day, he could have done it on different days, but the same day, he flies to Richmond and joins Starbucks workers. Then yesterday, he was at the White House at 8 a.m. outside the White House protesting for student loan debt relief. Like, he doesn't have to do all that. Most people his age, a game of shuffleboard is the limit of their physical activity for the day.
Right.
But he's out there at a protest outside the White House.
Yeah. Don't leave out canasta. That's a big part of the activity too. But for most people. But and that gets to another point that your book really illustrates. And again, Ari Rabin-Havt's book is The Fighting Soul on the Road with Bernie Sanders. One of the things that fascinates me about him is how enormously reactive he is to breaking news that coincides. And this comes across, he put in the Amazon, the Stop Bezos Bad Employers by Zeroing Out Subsidies Act. But there were so many times in both campaigns when something would happen and he not only immediately tweeted, but there was a tweet out about it, there was a statement out about it. He seems to me to be incredibly, almost electronically looped into this. He is
tied in, and he gets, you could tell if he beats you to the news, he's not happy about it, and he often does beat you to the news.
He wants you to know first, right?
Hey guys, why didn't you tell me about this? Because it happened 45 seconds ago.
Right.
Well, you had 45 seconds. Come on, guys. Chop.
Right. And look, if we're being honest about Bernie, I don't know if you'll ever experience this, but he might occasionally, like with me, Richard, why hasn't the color on the webpage been changed? And I said, well, because I know nothing about it. I have nothing to do with the color of the webpage. I wouldn't know. Well, you're a journalist. Do something about it. So there's that side too, but that's okay. It's what. There's another anecdote in your book, Ari, that I think raises some interesting questions. Okay. And this particular one was when the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, which you describe as an ostensibly progressive think tank, released a report attacking one of Bernie's bills. Warren Gunnels, who you mentioned, Bernie's chief of staff, pointed out that the think tank took money from Walmart. He did that on Twitter. Other progressives cried foul. How dare the integrity of the institution be questioned? In Bernie's Senate office, we could only laugh because, this gave Bernie, in a sense, the corner on this issue. There is a kind of Washington, including Washington left or liberal, culture of hands off certain things. And most electeds that you work for, they don't want you to get out ahead of them. They don't want you to get to be feisty on social media if they let you on social media at all. I always felt, and even I felt you guys in 2020 even more, Bernie not only was willing to challenge other institutions on the left, like the CBPP, but he was very happy to have you guys out there, whether it was you, Brianna Gray, or, Sirota, or anybody.
To a point, I do have a story in my book where Andrew Cuomo's spokesperson claimed to the Daily News that Bernie Sanders and Andrew Cuomo were lockstep on the issues. And I tweeted in response, the idea that Bernie Sanders and Andrew Cuomo are lockstep on the issues is 100% grade A American, I'll say BS to not say the curse on terrestrial radio.
Right. You've been remonstrating.
But I said the full word. And Andrew Cuomo lost his shit. Oh, sorry. Andrew Cuomo lost his mind.
Right.
And he started calling the office, demanding I get fired and demanding I be punished, And Bernie was in the air, and I go to the airport to meet him because of this. And because I want to get to him before Andrew Cuomo calls his cell phone. And he comes out and he's like, "Why are you here?" And so I tell him what happened, and he here's the tweet. He starts laughing. He's like, "Ari, you shouldn't have cursed. That's a good tweet." Yeah. Well, let's talk about it. What a better tweet would be if Andrew Cuomo was lockstep on policies with Bernie, he'll support Medicare for all. He's like, "That's a good tweet." And he's not wrong. Actually, it would be a good tweet. But yeah, he didn't he has a certain sense of decorum where in private he will curse, but in public he thinks it lacks decorum.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, he does. When people would ask me, and I love your opinion on this, when people would ask me, what's Bernie really like in person? My first answer would be, because there's not really much difference, but more swear words, he will let loose the occasional F-bomb. Let's talk about another aspect of Bernie that comes up occasionally in your book. Before I read the book, I was going to ask you, does he still have horrendous taste in restaurants? Is he still drawn to bad restaurants, which is one of my memories of him? You talk about a Saturday night in Beverly Hills, anywhere reasonable to eat, Ari, he says to you. And so it's Beverly Hills, hard to find what he considers reasonable.
And we were there for this event honoring Roseanne DeMora, or we wouldn't have been in Beverly Hills. That was this dinner with wealthy lawyers. And Bernie was like, "I'll give the speech, but I'm skipping the dinner."
That sounds like our Bernie. I tried so hard to get him to certain fundraisers. And what I kept getting back, he's not comfortable with those people.
Well, he wanted to honor Roseanne. He loves her.
Sure. She's great. She's a former head of the National Nurses United.
I'm going to skip the dinner.
Right. That's Bernie. So you wound up, instead of a meal in a room with high-priced LA attorneys, we ended up eating at the Cheesecake Factory. I got to tell you, Ari, the Cheesecake Factory is pretty upper, scale for Bernie, it seems to me.
It's not the Pizzeria Uno of Union Station, which he is referred to as the steak place. As a former waiter at Pizzeria Uno.
Right. He also used to like that very low budget Thai place on the second floor of Union Station.
He still loved that place all the way. But I was a waiter at Pizzeria Uno. I would in no way describe it ever as a steak place. And
that's the most hilarious thing I've ever heard. No, it's a pizza stand. It's a stand. It's not even a place.
He would, and the time he insisted that Outback Steak, once Jeff Weaver and I and a few other people had dinner at a steak place in DC, an expensive steak place called BLT, and some reporter wrote it in some DC newsletter, spotted at da-da-da, right? And Bernie would like make fun of us, and we were at like the Outback Steakhouse, I tell us in the book, in St. Clairsville, Ohio, and he's like, you can't say this is any worse than BLT. And it's like, yeah, I can say the steak at Outback, I can. I'm sorry. No, this steak is just as good.
Yeah,
Okay,
that sounds like, and I got chastised when I was working for him for paying $40 extra because I had hurt my back so that I could stretch my legs out on the plane. And I got chastised for that, even though I paid the $40.
Oh, really? We would have never chastised that. That was probably a difference. If you had a medical thing like that, 2020, we would not have chastised you.
He didn't know the medical thing. He says, what with the $40? What do you need that? Okay, well, I paid it. It's like, my little self-indulgence. What happened when we could talk more, and I hope we do, about the book itself, but what happened in terms of your relationship with Bernie when you let him know you were writing this book?
It was actually interesting. It was an in-between period. So I kind of signed the contract to write this book in May 2020, and then came back to work for him in August 2020, and then kind of finished it after I left in 2021. So the relationship was, I ended up working for him for a year after, basically, when I had already told him I was working on this book. So it didn't really, and working very closely with him on especially the first reconciliation bill.
Yeah. Oh, good. And, one of the things that I guess several more things I want to talk about, but one of the things I wanted to talk about too is you write a little bit about the communications with Facebook and meetings with Facebook and Bernie's relationship to social media. And that's, that's a complex one. We hadn't gotten into that in the earlier campaign that I know of, but this sort of, if you're a progressive of Bernie's ilk, I know he's one of a kind, but, and you're criticizing these institutions, but as you point out, at the same time, dependent on them, it creates a kind of complex. And by the way, when Bernie hired me, the last thing he said was, he said, one more question. Do you understand social media? Because I got to tell you, you don't look that young to me. And I said, well, I understand. A, I understand. Okay. B, now I got to sue you for age discrimination. And he said, well, I don't understand this shit. I don't, but he's great at it. But his relationship with social media is a complex one, right? Because it's such a powerful tool for him. And yet he shares the critiques many of us have of the entire existence of these social media corporations. So I don't know, any insights or thoughts to share about that?
I think it is complex. And I really encourage people to read the excerpts on his relationship with Facebook. I've been thinking, in light of Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, I'm kind of looking for somebody. I asked the publisher about finding somebody to do a serial of that section of the book with kind of a topper about Elon Musk, because I think it speaks to the power of social media that Bernie needs. It's this weird divergence almost, where Bernie's always wanted to have his own TV network, and Facebook and YouTube have given him this ability to actually have his own TV network, where he, last week he interviewed the Norwegian ambassador, right? Stuff that only Bernie would do, right? And will get attention, and and can do, and it's it's important his voice out there. But to do that, he's got to use these companies, and I think it is, it's a recognition of this problem that it's the only way to get it out. But you have to use these companies to do that. And in the book, Facebook, there's a story of Facebook just behaving massively inappropriately, basically telling Bernie they have a right to dictate. They should be dictating what policies he covers if he wants to maximize his use on their algorithm, his effectiveness on their algorithm. And it's kind of disgusting.
Well, it's disgusting, and it's also extremely important because it shows the invisible ways that these powerful corporations control the discourse. There's also right around that same section, Ari, there was a passage I really liked and close to a lot of my own, why I do what I do too. And I think a lot of us, Bernie's theory was simple. Capitalism causes people to believe the problems they are facing in life. He lists some are all things to be ashamed of. They sit alone in their despair, but then when they can tell them publicly, it inspires them to collective action. Now, these systems may not be designed for that, but that seems to me to be a primary operating principle for Bernie. And the one thing that always struck me is when he saw people who were struggling, if they were Trump voters, Clinton voters, Bernie voters, I always saw a lot of respect. Everybody's notes his crankiness or that he can scold people or whatever. I always saw him communicate with those voters with like a huge amount of respect and actually listen. That was always my takeaway with him. And I think it's because of this. I think it's kind of, he may not radiate compassion in his style, but I think it's a kind of compassionate listening that makes him effective.
It's very clear and very clearly a part of how he believes campaigns should work, that people should be able to tell their stories and politicians should listen to those stories and use those stories not as like a political stunt, but as something that motivates and drives you, and that and motivates others to tell their stories. Because if we all tell our stories about our problems, we'll recognize that our problems are the same. And it's not, capitalism tells us that it's our fault if you get sick and go bankrupt. It's our fault if you can't afford school. It's our fault if you're not making enough money. And he's like, if we all tell our stories and understand that we all have those same problems, then it's not our fault. It's society. There's a societal problem, and that means society has to fix that problem.
Yeah, that's almost a spiritual principle. And speaking of spiritual principles, one of the things that struck me when I worked for him is, although he's not a member of any organized religion, you might humor attempts and you say, oh, he's Jewish, but there was a kind of very spiritual dimension to him in that, for example, he had me compiling and writing about the works of Pope Francis and, any kind of idealistic, you know what I'm saying, take on, the moral way to live as human beings. Did you run across that at all during your travels with him?
Yeah. He's incredibly drawn to those people and like, you see that actually, first off, you saw that intimately in his relationship with Jesse Jackson, which is the book cover, is him, Jackson, the cover's him kind of praying with Jackson. It's an image of him praying that actually hangs in his office that I took. But it's there's that on a spiritual level. There's when I saw him and Cornel West kind of interact, you saw that live, right? Here's somebody he respects as this great humanist intellectual who is incredible in their in how they are just constantly teaching about the world to everybody.
Yeah, and it's beautiful quality. Look, there's two ways about it. So I shouldn't. Never a fair question for anyone, I guess, to prognosticate. But we got any thoughts on where Bernie might be going with his work in the next couple of years or so?
No idea.
Clueless, right? There's no way to know, right?
There's no way to know. What I do know is if anybody has the energy to do whatever if any 80-year-old has the energy to do whatever they want, it is Bernie. Like he is a marvel of for somebody his age.
Yeah, he really is, or any age, I would say. Well, anything else people should know about your book?
Buy the book. I really hoped, as you said, it was it's supposed to. I wrote it to be a fun read, not kind of a droll political book, and I hope people enjoy it. The Fighting Soul. You can buy it anywhere books are sold, so you don't have to go to the certain company owned by a certain bald individual who likes to go to space. You can buy it from other places as well,
including bookshop.org, or if you don't want to go out. Okay. So, and it's widely distributed. It's doing very well. So again, my guest Ari Rabin-Havt, the book, The Fighting Soul, On the Road with Bernie Sanders. Ari, as always, great talking with you. Thanks for writing the book, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you, Richard.
And we'll be right back after this. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.